Welcome to Storycomic Presents, where we interview amazing storytellers and artists. This is episode 45. With us is Banana Chan and Tim Devine. They're here to talk about the widely anticipated Kickstarter Questlings, a children's book series and a role-playing game adventure. And as of this recording, this is the first day it was launched, and it has already met its goal. So congratulations, you guys have 131 backers already, and you still have 23 days left. So congratulations in advance, and well, not in advance, it actually happened. And and thanks for joining, and thanks for joining us tonight. And I know this is a big day for you, and I'm honored that you the two of you decided to come on the interview, and we're going to talk all about the Kickstarter and all about the game that the two of you designed. But first, I know Banana, you've been on before, so if you want to give kind of like an abbreviated background of yourself, and then we'll have Tim talk about his game designing background as well. So
yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me on again. Hopefully I'm not taking too much of your live stream space. So I'm Banana Chan. I am the owner and co-founder of a small box board game publishing company. I also publish RPGs, and I design RPGs. I write them, and I've worked on some stuff with Hasbro, Renegade, and now I'm working with Lenneman Games. So very exciting.
Cool. And we have with us too is with Tim Devine, who is also a game designer. He's written a lot of games, and the two of you, and we talked about earlier, the two of you first connected with each other through Tim, through your game, the North Sea Epilogues, correct?
Yeah. So my wife and I are game designers and writers, and we worked with Garfield Games and Renegade Games to make the North Sea Epilogues, and we reached out to Banana as one of the core writers of the game. We had four people who wrote adventures for the game, and then a bunch of other really talented people as stretch goals. But Banana was awesome enough to jump on that with us, and then it was a couple of years ago now. So since then, I've worked, designed a couple games, and then wrote for games like Kids on Bikes and Teens in Space, also from Renegade and Hunters Entertainment.
Wow. And so, as you said, so talk to us first a bit about how the two of you got connected through this game, Questlings, which, as we just said, just launched today. And as we can see, for the viewers out there seeing this is it's already past the goal, and it's only been out for less than a day, and we'll get into how it first started off as sort of a children's book. But how did the creation of this as a role-playing game, which the two of you designed and worked on, talk us through how this happened?
Yeah, so basically what happened was Dan Lutzring, who is not here today, he was writing the children's books with Nicholas Yu and Bryce O'Connor, and I believe they were like working on the series of books for a while. They brought on Jackie Davis and John Merchant to work on the art and the graphic design. And this is like a children's book series that's based on role-playing games, and just like role-playing games in general, like sort of like D&D style of genre. So when that happened, he was like, oh, maybe we should make an RPG with this, because it's a book that's based on playing RPGs in general, and like having an inner hero. So they reached out to me, and I was like, oh yeah, absolutely. Like anytime I get to work with Dan, or like we have never worked before, we've talked about it, but this is like the first official time that we're like actually working on something together. So Dan asked me to work on him with the RPG. And after that, we talked back and forth. We were like, doing this thing together. I designed like a foundation. And then I soon realized that, and the foundation of the game I had worked on with Mabel Harper, just doing some like quick development stuff. And then I realized later on down the line that we needed like kids to play test this because I've been play testing it with like older kids and I've been play testing it with adults, but I realized like what's it going to be like playing this with a younger audience, like an even younger audience of like 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 or that kind of audience. So I reached out to Tim because I know Tim has kids, and I was like, "Hey, would you be interested in working on this thing with us?" And initially, I think you were in one of our play tests, and then after that, I was like, "Oh, this would be a great opportunity for us to like work together, like all of us work together on this thing."
And Tim. So how did that work with Banana reaching out to you, say, hey, do you want to work with us on this? What was going through your mind? What were some of the ideas that you brought to the table? How did that process work for you?
I mean, well, I was thrilled that she was making a kids game because we've, like Banana said, we have young kids. We have a 7-year-old son who we've been playing role-playing games with him since he was about 3. And some of the games that were out there at the time were fantastic, but not necessarily for 3-year-olds. So Kristen and I, being game designers, we made our own. And so we've been making and playing different iterations of kids games for a very long time now. And when she said, do you want to play test this? I played it. It was fantastic. She started bouncing some things off me, and eventually it's sort of this conversation turned into more, do you want to collaborate? And so taking the foundation that Banana had, which was just an awesome game that really complements the books and is very unique in its approach with this sort of duality of characters where you're playing a kid who has an inner hero. So in most games you play a character. In this game you're playing 2, or one with another persona. And I was able to get it to the table with my son. We were able to play through it, and it was very clear that the foundation didn't need to change. It was solid. It was good. There were elements that needed to be sort of brought down to a level where it could be really accessible for them, and also for adults who may not be gamers, or maybe gamers but not necessarily gamers with kids, to help kind of balance that out. So a lot of the stuff that I kind of did early on was a heavy amount of play testing and sort of streamlining some stuff. Yeah.
So I noticed too is that the books are aged from 4 to 7 around, but the game you all put as rated as like ages 8 and up. Was there a deliberate reason to make the games a bit more mature for kids, or was that something where I guess was it, as I say, was it deliberate, or was it just that the game mechanics itself seemed to have fit better for an older children? How did that work?
I think so the game does run with younger kids. So Tim, we've played with your kids, and we've played with Dan's kids who are younger. But I think we realize that not all kids come from like a gaming family. And so maybe they're not as, they haven't been exposed as much to games. So that's why we set that range up a little bit higher. And also, if someone was reading the book, it's better, like if it was like a GM or something, it's better for like an older kid to read through it in order to get a grasp of how to run it.
Yeah, and I think also age, like kids read at all different ages, and some learn to read early, some read a little bit later, but putting a younger age on it might be a little bit misleading if you have a combination of parents who've never gamed before and have really young kids. They might look at that and then it might be any game out there that's a role-playing game, it might be a little bit overwhelming. But definitely, I think it says it on the Kickstarter page, but in a lot of the interviews and actual plays we've done, it said that you can play this with younger kids. There's elements that you can kind of really easily scale it down a little bit in that.
And and both of you as well, you've worked a lot and also with tabletop games and whatnot. Or was it ever specific to have the direction be this is going to be a role-playing game, or was there ever any discussion on, hey, what would this look like if it was a card-based game, or what would it look like if it was actually like a board game? Was discussions like that bandied about as well?
I think the idea behind Questlings was that we wanted it to be an RPG with dice, with possibly maps, and definitely using the same characters as the ones from the books. So having those pre-generated characters available to everyone. So if they wanted to play them, play their favorite kid / inner hero from the stories, and they can do that. And because the storybooks are so heavily influenced by RPGs, Dan initially, when he spoke with me, he just wanted it to be like an RPG.
And I did notice too, is like, in the write-up, it talks about that you have these pre-generated characters that are on there, and there's also, but you can, on the back, you can make your own character if somebody would like as well. Was there ever any discussion about, some conversations about the perception of like gender-locked classes with, a female paladin or a male mage or any of that stuff, talking about because I think that the question that you brought up is like, these are based off of the storybooks, which are written out. How much of that inside the game are there, questions to say, this is how you make your own character and all that aspects of it?
There's definitely a section in the book, but I don't know if you want to jump in.
No, you go ahead.
Yeah,
we're talking a lot.
So to tie in the book series with the role-playing game, there's definitely the pre-generated characters. None of the character sheets at the moment, they don't say like on them what you are, so it's really just tying them together in that sense. But like you said, you can flip it over, or if you print up just the blank character sheets, you can make anything that you want. There is a part of the book that kind of goes through that, and it's real easy to do. But the player or the character sheet goes through as the character, your name, your pronouns, and your favorite food. So unlike a lot of role-playing games, it's not like class driven or style driven, template driven in that sense. So there's no mechanical implications on like what you're playing as.
And I gotta say, one of there's a few very very interesting and unique features to this game that I want us to talk about a bit. One of them is the safety tools. Talk to us a bit about the safety tools aspect of that, and how does that help children learn more about role-playing games?
Yeah. So initially, I think in like the core, like when we first started doing like the foundation of the game, we had a red, amber, green system, which some games use. So green means that things are going great. I want to see more of this thing that's happening. Amber is I'm a little hesitant about like what's going on. Can we slow down a little bit? And red basically means stop. Like, I don't want to do this. This is making me feel uncomfortable and I don't like it. So let's rewind and redo the scene. So a few RPGs use a system similar to this. The Safety Flower does this. It's a little more in depth for tabletop RPGs, but LARPs do it as well. And when we initially worked on this, I had this idea, I like just put that in. But then when Tim came on, he had this great idea of making them into emojis, which kids love. I mean, kids love emojis, but like kids love like tapping on them and using them. And that made it a lot more accessible.
So Tim, how did that work for like, bringing that in? What was some of the ideas you had about that? Was that about the putting them as emojis?
I think with younger kids, they're super bright and they're super imaginative, and they're also really just naturally compassionate. So they have the capacity to do this. What they may not have is the same sort of understanding that we all have when we all say, hey, we're going to use an X card. But a kid's not necessarily going to know what that means. You need to demonstrate it quite a few times for them to really understand it. And even then, it's in the middle of the table. It's away from them. Can they reach it? Should they reach it? An introvert isn't going to do that. They might suffer the whole game in discomfort because they can't really come out of their shell and say that they don't like something. So my first thought was just these character sheets were so amazing when I first saw them, and almost nothing has changed. We rearranged a few like sections and where they go and stuff, but I saw instantly like these character sheets. A kid doesn't need a rule book to play because it has everything they need on it. It has who they are. It has what they're good at. It has the instructions on what to do when you roll the dice. So why not also include your own space for your safety tools? And what I love about Banana's original idea of having the red, amber, green, aside from just an X card, is you're not just saying no. You're also saying, this is fun. I'm really enjoying this, and kids use that. We have a couple of the videos up on the site show how the kids were using it, and the majority of the times in the game they were saying they liked something, and usually it was that they liked something that another kid was doing. So when one kid was saying something that was really creative or really fun or funny, another kid was touching the green and indicating, they were having a great time. And I don't think enough games really do that where they celebrate the good stuff you're doing as well. So we had some kids in the game not really like something that was kind of scaring them, so they used the red. But most of the time they were tapping green. So it gave us the idea when Banana and I were co-facilitating a game, and we knew, as when we were facilitating it, that it was good. It was going well. Kids liked it because they were actually telling us that they liked it, using the mechanics.
So both of you who've designed games before, what were some of the challenges that you faced designing a game for children as compared to doing some more games for adults?
I think for me, like anytime I design something, I think like, oh, is this too simple? So I just sort of overload it with stuff. And designing this, like even, having like all these things laid out and like stripping away as much as I could, it was still very difficult for me to like pare things down and make sure that it was like kid friendly enough. And I guess also like wording, like there are some things that I think, for example, like one of the examples that I can give is before we had like chemistry class as like one of the things that you could take in the adventure. And Tim was just like, wait a second, I don't think chemistry class is like a thing for younger kids. Like we might have to change this. So things like that. Like, obviously I've forgotten like a lot of things that happened as a kid. So I definitely need a bit of guidance there.
But also too, from that aspect, do you see challenges of adults being the game master in the sense that kids are way more creative than adults? As adults, we forgot how to use our imagination. Do you see when, some of these runs, there's like, is there any, spots in the book to talk about, just let the story go, or just let the kids come up with their, is there any parts in there in the book or just some any advice that you would give to GMs that would be purchasing this on how to run with kids on this?
Tim, do you want to take this one?
Sure. Yeah. There is a section for the game moderator, and this kind of ties in with your last question too. Like one of the challenges in doing a game for kids is when you're writing a game for adults, you're typically writing to a player. A lot of books have a section, and like one of the first sections in the table of contents is who are you going to play as, and then it says, and later on, or in some systems in a whole other book, how to run the game, like how to be a game master or dungeon master, whatever they want to call it. But in this game, the focus for kids is really who's going to run it, how are they going to facilitate. So we give a lot of tools in there for preparation, how to run the game. We have a couple things that exist in other games, but we kind of really simplified it. being a fan of the kids and their inner heroes. It's not you against them. Ask questions and listen to their answers. It'll help you, narrate the story a little bit better and encourage them to try. So like there's things in the book that really help a facilitator, and also a lot of reminders that this isn't, don't overcomplicate it. You're telling a story together. You're creating a story. The other thing that really helps, and again was part of the foundation and ties it to the books as well, is this system has a structure to it. It's not as, although you can do anything you want with it, it really has a structured scene flow. You have an opening scene and it has its elements. You have scenes at each location that the children go to. Each of those scenes has elements, and then you have a final scene. So it gives you some structure so that, like you said, kids have amazing imaginations, but what they may not have are the ability to connect with other people's imaginations and understand how everybody's paradigms are working together. So kind of syncing those together is important, and giving everybody the right structure to know that now what we're doing is going to the library. So, yes, Felix, you want to go to the sports field? I understand that, but we're all at the library now. And at the library, Jane is the spotlight character. So Jane, you're going to answer some questions. So everybody, let's listen to Jane, and then we'll all have a turn in a little bit. So I think it gives enough in the book to really help people through that. But the game mechanics themselves really help facilitate a good structured game for people that are new to RPGs. But I played the game with a lot of people that are not new to RPGs, and they appreciated that structure as well.
So yeah, as you said, you talked about that on that. It's like spotlight a player basically, and is that something that that is unique to this game, or is this something that you've seen and that you inspired from other games that you've played, or is this something that you thought this was very specific and would fit perfectly in with working with children?
Honestly, I would say Fiasco is one of the big ones that uses spotlighting a lot. A lot of the more indie games, they do that sort of thing where it's like, when you're playing in any sort of session, like one person gets spotlit, they can pass it along if they wanted to. If they want to keep it, that's fine as well. But having that option of like, keeping or passing along the spotlight is really important, just so that everyone gets equal screen time. And sometimes, you have players who like to be a little louder and take, over a scene a little bit. So that's why, I think spotlight mechanics are really important. And also it's okay if like, a player wants to have like a shorter, play time or shorter, period of time where they're playing. Specific to Questlings, I think like there is a short period where you are spotlit, but then once that spotlighting scene is done, it goes into a fantasy world where basically all the other players are there to support you. So it's not just you by yourself doing this one thing. You have the chance later on to like go into the fantasy transition and roll together as a team.
And so talk to us a bit about that. I mean, so a part of it is as we looked at, like there's a list there's a list of roles, as you say, is like the fantasy transition that happens. Now, from a design perspective, a game manager, that actually is part of the process. So basically every turn there's that fantasy transition that happens. Now, from I'm putting on my world building hat now because this takes place in the world. Is this how much? So I'm thinking about it from the perspective of, when the Star Wars role-playing game was made, the designer from West End Games basically was like, I have to make up history of all these races. So how much leeway, or how much did Dan, the creator of this, give the two of you to say, well, how does this happen? Is it, are these children, predetermined, they have this magic power or whatever? Or is like, how did that from the background of the game perspective, not necessarily the design perspective, but the background of the game, of the story behind it, how does that happen?
I felt like we had a lot of leeway, to be honest. I mean, we still had to hit specific notes from the IP, like the series of books, making sure that the fantasy thing is there, making sure that we use specific locations that correlate with the book. But other than that, it was pretty freeform.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned West End Games Star Wars. That was my entry point to role-playing games when I was 10 years old or something like that. A lot of people started in through Dungeons and Dragons. I came in through West End Games, and it's because of them that we have such awesome Star Wars lore. But back to Questlings. Like what Banana said, we had lots of free reign, which is actually really good because not everybody is going to be coming to this game with Lord of the Rings, Dungeons and Dragons in mind. They might have Disney shows like Princess Sophia, or they might have Labyrinth or other types of things coming into. You don't know how they're going to be viewing things. So if you're going to write a shorter book, a role-playing book for people, you don't need to pack it full of lore if you leave it open enough for them to bring their own to the table.
So like the two of you, like, like Tim and Banana, are you like, seems like we need a meta plot? Like what's like, you're looking at that stuff? Or like, I mean, I guess, from that perspective of building games, it's like designing games. How much do you enjoy going down the rabbit hole on this? Like thinking about, oh, we could do this, or what would be like a supplement book, for this, or like how much do now that we've seen it successful and you obviously have a market and an audience for this, what are some new you guys have like any ideas, or nothing to make it official, but does this spark some imagination on, as I say, some supplement books or some, because you have, not only do you have the ability for the children's book aspect for kids, but also the homages to, Dungeons and Dragons of do classes. Is there any, this is more of a freeform question. I'm just wondering what you guys are thinking now with knowing that there's an audience for this.
Yeah. So Dan has mentioned that he wants a field trip thing where the kids go on a field trip and then you're using like another map. So there are talks about like having new maps accompanying storybooks with different locations. So you're not just constrained to having this one map that looks like a suburban town, but when you're creating the world, it could be like your own town, right? Like it could be a city, it could be a more rural area. So there's that. I think Tim mentioned he had like 3 or 4 pages worth of ideas that he was gonna be like, we should make all of these things.
Yeah, when you're like, but I don't know if you're like this, like, because when you write for games and you're designing games, but not necessarily at the same time. So the design has to be there, it has to be solid, people have to be able to play it. And then you walk away from it after you've been designing and you're laying in bed or you're having a chat with somebody, and all of a sudden the writer's ideas come in, because we both write for a bunch of other games as well. And that's when we can sort of let it go. That's when I remember my partner and I were writing for Orun, which is a game that's going to be coming out soon. It funded really, did great on Kickstarter. We wrote these worlds for it, these expansive worlds, and we just got to pour all of this lore that we wanted to into these worlds that we created. That's not something that's helpful when you're mid-design because it really takes you off course. So for this, I think it's been a focus on that, but now we're at the point where, I mean, the game isn't being play tested. It's complete and it's solid. So now is the time where those thoughts are going to start flooding in. One of the first ones that I immediately thought of after even playing originally with Banana was how cool it would be to go to an amusement park, because that has all the locations that you'd want. Like think of Disneyland, where you've got like Fantasyland and Adventureland, Tomorrowland. And it's like those are locations kids can go to all those places. So there's really no limit to that. It's really just a matter of how to approach it. how would Game in a Curry and Let 'em in Games want to approach that?
Well, just what you're talking about, it just reminded me of like last year when my wife and I went to an IKEA, and that would be a good one. It's like a labyrinth, like it's just like an maze. You're just gonna get lost.
I mean, aren't there restaurants that have put out role-playing games now? I'm sure IKEA could put out could partner with you both, and it'll be the first official IKEA role-playing game.
But I mean, that's just a side note. We went there. I don't have any of you ever been to an IKEA?
Oh yeah.
So yeah, it's a one way. The one that we went to in Canada, it's one way. You have to. There's only one way up in the escalator, and it takes you all. So yeah, when one of my wife said, "Oh, I forgot something. You have to go back to the car." I had to go through the entire IKEA, go through the maze, and come back and grab the keys and come back. But anyway, it's
basically. It fits with the conversation because IKEA is basically a dungeon crawl.
It is a dungeon crawl.
It's a real life dungeon crawl. Except you don't gain bags of gold. You lose it. and you gain a whole bunch of Allen wrenches
and Kalax.
But so talk to us. So as you mentioned to the audience, there's basically how this game works is that you are playing two characters. You're playing this, the normal world. And so what does that transition happen when all of a sudden you go into this fantasy transition? Is this something that is, does this in the game itself, is this imagination or is there an actual transition that happens? Or is that based off of the whim of the game master or the interpretation of the players? How does that work?
So in the storybook, we have it all outlined. And by storybook, I mean like the storybook within the RPG. So everything is outlined for you. So dependent on where the players want to go on the map, say they go to a library. So they go to the library, they're looking for something. And all the characters are, they're looking for items to accomplish their goal. And the goal is basically like the adventure, right? In of itself. And so when they get to the library, maybe they are looking for a book. And so they find, like the spotlight character, say they find the book, but it's like on a really high shelf or something like that. And so they have to roll a d6, and then, depending on what happens, they narrate that out. And then once that's done, the GM will read out a prompt from the book itself that eases them into this transition of the fantasy world. And once again, to the fantasy world, all the players, they roll their dice, helping the spotlight character trying to get the book. That's now probably like, a fantasy version of the book. So maybe it's a spell book or, something like that.
And so does everybody transition then if there's the fantasy transition? So
yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
And I don't think it's expressly written that it has to be just imaginary, because depending on who you're playing with, the kids don't really. It's hard to say. Like the movie Page Master, it's a very similar type of a thing, where it's all happening and you watch it and you're experiencing it with them. I don't think my son, when he plays it, separates the two. I think he thinks it's all real. I don't think it's an imagination. I think he thinks the world transforms for him and he becomes this new person. And then some kids playing it might be able to really compartmentalize it and say, no, we're just imagining now. This is playtime. And that's also a pretty good tool for an adult to use if it does get a little bit intense, where you start to describe the lights going dark and a sounds coming from around the corner because things are transitioning, and the kid taps on their yellow and they're like, I don't know about this. And you're like, remember, it's just imaginary. It helps, but I think it's up to everybody to sort of play it how they want.
Yeah, well, that was going to bring up my other question is like, so looking at like future adventure modules, what if one of the the challenge they face is maybe like a spider or something, and so how flexible are you able to have, as you say, working with maybe GMs that would be parents that have never done role playing before, where how flexible would you have that in those modules to say, if this is too scary, you can do this, or how would you do that as game designers?
Yeah, so in the book, we have a table of a whole bunch of different adventures that you can replace if things don't seem like they're going so well. So they are still locations, and there are still like location-specific events that happen. But say a location-specific event, one of the prompts just doesn't, fit well with the players around the table. Then the GM can just flip through the pages, go back to like the D20 page with the chart with all like the adventure prompts, and roll from there and pull something from there. That's entirely possible. They can totally do that. And there's also a lot of leeway for for GMs to change things and change the prompts if they want.
And so, Tim, talk to us a bit about the dice. Now, this is interesting. What I love about this system is that your dice change when you go into your fantasy transition. You want to talk to us a bit about that, how that works?
Yeah, so when you're playing your real world character, anytime you're asked to make a roll for something, you're going to be using a 6-sided dice. And there's a little breakdown on the character sheet of what happens if you roll a 3 or less, what happens if you roll a 4 or 5, etc. And when you transform or transition into the fantasy world, you're rolling a D8, which is great for multiple reasons. One, it changes it up a little bit, so it adds some more depth to the game without really making a change that that's going to confuse anyone. The other thing it does is really help solidify with the kids that it's transition time. That oh yeah, I'm it helps them understand when I'm using the pointy one, I'm the inner hero. And then when you roll the dice, I think just to go off of, you were asking specifically about like the mechanics, right, around the dice.
Yeah.
So not just about the dice you're rolling. When you in a lot of games, role-playing games for adults, when you roll the dice, the outcome is narrated by the game master, the person running the game. So in this game, it's there's others like it, but in this game in particular, if you roll low and it doesn't go your way, you still get to own that narrative. So you get to sort of say what happened. And so kids don't like failure. They don't like in a game. Everyone needs to learn about it, but they don't necessarily like being told, "You failed. Your turn is over. Now sit quietly, because it's somebody else's turn now, and we'll get back to you later." That's not a good way to facilitate a game for kids. So what we do in this game is when you roll the dice, the number you can look at the character sheet and you can see, I rolled a 4 to 5. That's a nice job. That means it goes well. But something weird happens. Tell us what it was. And so the kid gets to say, "Oh, cool. Well, I got the item that I wanted, but I forgot to wear my socks today. So I have to walk around the rest of the day with no socks." And kids come up with some funny stuff because it doesn't have any bearing on whether or not they failed or passed. It's just a strange thing that happens, and it's great storytelling. It's great like improv for kids to do. If they get a 6 or higher, it's fantastic. So they get to say how, what does that look like, and they get to say how it went fantastically for them. And then if they get a 3 or less on the 6-sided die when they're their kid, we don't say you failed. We say, "Oops, what went wrong?" And not only that, but they also get what's called a boost, which is a cool little mechanic in the game. It's like a little currency. And that boost is something that they could use later to help re-roll the dice. So let's say they rolled a 3 or lower and they weren't really happy with that. And then they go, "Oh, I forgot on my character sheet I have a boost, so I want to use one." So they use the boost, they erase it, or if you're using little tokens or little candies or something, they eat it. I don't know what they do. But then they can use that boost and they can re-roll the die and try again. The other thing they can do with boosts is, because we're using a map, when you're going from one location to another as the spotlight character, you can only move one distance, so one line between you and another place. But if you use a boost, you can move further. The other thing with the boost that's kind of cool is, which is in the book, is it's used as sort of a bargaining tool. If a kid wants to, and they will always want to, go a little bit outside the rules, a little bit outside the structure, want to do something, you don't have to waste a lot of time saying, no, and you can yes and them by saying yes, but it's going to cost you a boost. And then they might reconsider, or it might be worth it. And if it's that worth it, they're going to spend a boost. It belongs in the game. The 8-sided die works the same way, except the numbers are a little bit different because the math is a little bit different. But it's still the same thing. If you get a 4 or less, oops, what went wrong? If you get a 5 or 6, nice job, but something weird happens, and they get to say what it was. And if it's a 7 or higher, fantastic. The most important takeaway there, though, is that the kids get ownership of the narrative, so they get to say what happens, and it's up to the person running the game to work it back into the story.
It was, and then you mentioned there, it was that one thing is that we talk about kids don't like failure, kids don't like to fail. There was one of my teacher friends says when they hand in it, if there's an assignment that didn't, they say it's not yet, it's not a fail, it's a not yet, instead of that. So.
Yeah. That's cool. Yeah. And it's important to learn about that. But I mean, if you're sitting down to play a game specifically, it's supposed to be fun.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I think some adults need to learn that too.
There's lots of games out there that deal with failure differently. So you can have those experiences too.
Right.
Just not in Questlings.
Now, so talking about Questlings, talking about the Kickstarter, one of the things that I loved about these tiers is that it's that basically it's just they're completely straightforward. It's not not begrudging other tier systems, but this one is just boom, 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 boom. Do you guys just want to talk us through about these tier systems? What people can expect?
Sure. Yeah, sure. So I think initially we had a lot more tiers and a lot more things going on. But then eventually we decided, let's just, make it simple for everyone. Let's just do $10 for 2 ebooks, $15 for one or the other physical books, and, make sure that the ebook is accessible to everyone. And then, $29 for both books, $60 for the essentials pack. So that's both the books, 6 pre-generated character sheets, and the other side is like a blank character sheet, and those are dry erase. So if you're using dry erase markers, you can totally erase them. And like a set of 13 dice. So 12 of the dice, they're separated into 2s. So you have each one specific to the different characters that we have from the books, and then you also have that one special black D20, which is the GM's dice. So if they want to roll, out of the tables that we have provided, then they can totally do that as well. We also have some bookmarks. So the bookmarks are all specific to the characters as well. When you're playing the game, if players would like more of a visual cue as to when things are going to turn to the fantasy side, you would flip the bookmark over to the fantasy character, like the inner hero, so that everyone knows what's going on. And when it goes back to reality, you flip it again to the kid's side. The bookmark is also a great tool for players to use when they're being spotlit. So you would pass the bookmark around, or you just put your bookmark a little closer to the table so that people know that you're being spotlit right now. We also have a map. So the map itself is going to be available in every tier. Like everyone's going to have a digital version of the map. But for here, we're going to have like a physical version of the map for everyone. And then finally, we have our big $200 tier where you get to play with a streamer. So we have Lisa Penrose and Gabe Hicks on as the 2 streamers that will be GMing a game for you. So you can choose either streamer to play the game with you. And on top of that, you get everything else.
There's only 7 of those left right now.
Yeah.
I gotta say though, one of the things that I love about this is whose idea was it to have the dry erase player character sheets? That is a brilliant idea. Who came up with that one? Who wants to take credit for that?
I don't remember who did. It might have been Dan.
I don't recall.
Yeah, I don't recall either now. It's been a blur. Let's just say Dan did it. Yeah,
it's
Dan's
funny
idea.
because before I knew that was going to actually be in the Kickstarter, so I have it right here. My son plays it quite a bit, and we kept printing them out. So now I just put them in these protectors, and he writes on them with dry erase. And so now when we get the essentials pack, it'll be it'll be so much nicer. But the other two things about the essentials pack that are really, really cool. So I know Banana, you mentioned the bookmarks. Those are awesome, like on many levels, because kids like to have like more stuff. The spotlight, flipping it over, the spotlight, and also flipping it over for the fantasy reality. The D20 is really cool because even though it's not something mechanically that the GM has to have, it's kind of neat for a kid to aspire to something. So if they play the game, at some point they're going to want to run it. At some point they're going to want to be the person narrating it, and it's sort of a cool thing to sort of just pass that to them and say, okay, you could sit in this chair. You're in charge of this dice now, and there you go. So I love when I saw the layout. That I think John did this, right?
Yeah, John did.
My first thought was I'm going to hand that to my kid when he's ready to run. I mean, he's already saying he wants to, so I should probably let him.
So what were some of the, as we kind of, we mentioned, we talked about it a little bit earlier on, future installments and things like that. What do you see as you guys design these? What were some of the successes that you learned from building this game that you're definitely going to say, all right, next time I get contracted to work on a game or something like this, I like this, this piece of it. What are some of those things that your takeaways from this as designers?
It's a good question.
Honestly, the map and storybook pairing, like that's basically something that I've been playing with like for a while, and I haven't really gotten a chance to like actually put it into practice until now. So that's something I'm really excited for.
Yeah, I think for me, the being more forward with safety tools. So they're mentioned in almost every game now, and people are, but not being afraid to put them in the forefront and say that this is something that will make your game better. It's not a nice to have. And I think that, and also, so when I played the game for the first time with Banana, she had the spotlight in there, and I had been using a similar thing with our son for years, and it works so well that I hadn't seen it put to practice in a kid's game before. And to see it, it was just like, it's not something that I would say fits your question exactly, but it's one of those things where it was like such validation of like, yes, I mean, it's been working, but I've never really had a chance to put it in anything because I haven't published a kid's game or written or designed a kid's game for mass consumption. But now, Banana did it and it worked, and now it's good. So I think definitely for games that require an element of turns, I think Spotlight is a good approach, but always putting the safety tools in the mechanics in the forefront is going to be a thing I'll strive for.
Right. And what aspects, what parts of the game did you have that the two of you had to tweak or fix after you did it with children? What are some of those things? Is there any pieces that you had to tweak at all?
I think the boosts were the big one.
Yeah, you want to talk about the move, because it started with moves.
Yeah, and then you could talk about boosts if you want.
Sure. Yeah.
Like that. Basically, so initially when we ran the game, how we had the game set up was it was based off of sort of like a Powered by the Apocalypse type of system where we had moves, but they were so simplified that it's just like, I mean, they weren't so simplified that it was easy to grasp for kids, but it was more simplified in the way that when, someone doesn't succeed at a roll, they would mark like towards a move. So once they filled up their moves, they can use that move for later on. And that was like sort of the idea going in. But then like, as we were playtesting this, as we were playing this, we realized it was kind of clunky and it could have been streamlined a lot better, especially with like shorter games and like, with kids who, don't really want to wouldn't really understand like, you know, that entire process. So Tim came up with the idea of sort of just like stripping everything down and like making it much more streamlined and like so much better. And just like basically turning the moves into boosts that were currency that are used in the game.
Okay. Yeah, so in playtesting, we looked at the moves originally and what you could do with them. And we saw of the 4 moves that were available, kids or adults playing it went towards 2. They didn't ever go really for the other ones. And so in a game that's a set amount of time, especially for kids, because their attention spans can, you know, and not even to say their attention spans, it could also be that dinner time has come, you know, it's 45 minutes to dinner time. We could play a game, but we have a set ending. So there's things in the game that can kind of shrink it down. But what that does to a game like the Apocalypse style games, Powered by the Apocalypse, is you don't get to do all the things that you'd want to do. So you're not going to earn enough points during the game to get all these cool things. So what we did was, like Banana said, we kind of pared it down to these boosts. So if you fail, you get a boost, and you can use the boost for a thing. If you're doing something really, really creative, the GM might reward you a boost, and you could use it the same way. If you're really helpful to somebody or just really kind to somebody else out of game, if one of the players helps somebody understand one of the rules or gives them a good idea or is really kind, you can award them a boost, and it works the same way. So it kind of like took the concept but made it a little, you can now approach it from different angles. Failure with the mechanics, or some just good role playing and good, you know, being good people. The other cool thing about boost, which happened organically after changing it, was now if you wanted to do extended play, so if you want to play for one game and you each kid has a goal, you work through that, you go through the locations, you get all the items you need for the goal, you complete it, now the game's over. But what if you want to come back to the table again and play the same characters and do another day, or, you know, do another type of thing? Now your boosts can kind of carry over. So if you had 3 boosts at the end of the last game, now you can keep those 3 boosts and go to the next game. And you also get another star to put on any of your stats that you want. So inadvertently, we kind of like streamlined the mechanic of failure and boosts and moves, and created an ability for long-term play.
So it has kind of like a character development aspect to it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so what are some of the what's the difference if somebody was going to play, say, the mage or the monk or the paladin? Are there specific skills that each template has?
Not necessarily. So it's more based on the player's preference, right? Like, what do you imagine this character being like in this situation? So we do have descriptions in the book as well for people who aren't so familiar with D&D and fantasy, the fantasy genre in general. So we have some descriptions that they can come to their own conclusions with once they read them. But I think keeping it a little more open-ended and just using the artwork would give players like a little bit more agency. And obviously, if a player is going towards, a character that looks like them, they're more excited for that than having something that's already fixed in stone.
Okay.
Yeah, so there's no reason for a person not to play, like in their mind, they're visualizing their character they want to play as a warrior, but choose the bard or the monk or the mage who doesn't have, or the druid who they don't have like weapons in their hands. There's no limiting you in that way. And also because the blank character sheet is very blank, like there's no class written on it at all, and no pictures, you can why not be a pirate? Why not be a fairy queen? You're a hero. Your inner hero is your own in that sense, so you can make whatever you want. But like Banana was saying, there's stuff in the book to help people who don't understand necessarily the touchstones that are kind of the core to role-playing games. But everyone brings something. I mean, it doesn't. You could be maybe the person is coming with what's that Tom Cruise movie? Was it Legend? Tim Curry.
Yeah.
Yeah, if that's where they're coming from, maybe all the characters are more like that, or Dark Crystal, maybe that's where they're coming from. So they can really do whatever they want with them.
So this is great. And so, as we say, you already, looking at it, you've already reached your goal. Since we've been talking, just 4 more backers showed up, and so, as I say, so congratulations on reaching their goal. It's very excited. It's just only going to go up from here. And so, where can people find you? So I know that Banana Chan, you're at Game and a Curry. Tim, so where can people find you if they want to, read more of the work you've done?
Yeah, I'm pretty active on Twitter, at GMTimD. That's where I usually post anything about gaming stuff. That's really all I do there. And diceupgames.com is a website that you can go to find my partner and I, the stuff we've done. We've done a lot of like little one-page RPGs and things like that, and then obviously North Sea epilogues. And then Roll to Play Network. My partner and I, so Kristen Devine is my wife. She and I and our friend Kent Blue are the co-founders of the Roll to Play podcast network. So we do role-playing game, tabletop game podcasts. There's a bunch of different shows on the network, ranging from actual plays to interviews to Meeple Syrup Show is actually kind of a partner of ours. So they do all kinds of stuff in the board game space. And it's a good network. It's another place that I had met Banana early on. We had the privilege of playing Dads on Mowers, which was her kids on bikes adventure. And it was just a fantastic time, and embarrassingly had been recorded as a podcast.
It was a good episode. I thought it was a fun time.
I still think it's fun. That's where you could find me.
Okay. And Banana, where can people find you?
People can find me on Twitter almost all the time at Game and a Curry through my company, Game and a Curry. But they can also find my personal stuff at Banana Chan Games on Twitter and Instagram.
Okay. Well, thanks a lot, Banana and Tim. This has been great, and I am really excited to check this game out. I think this is the perfect age for my kids, and this will add this to our repertoire of bedtime stories. Basically, we have some dice we throw around for bedtime stories, so this is going to be fun. So,
that's awesome.
So thank you very much, guys, and as I say, congratulations again, and be looking forward to hearing more about the work you'll be doing in the future.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Banana, this is exciting because this is the first time I've had somebody on twice. So, yeah.
I feel very special. Thank you for having me on twice.
Thanks for coming on a second time. That must be something too for me.
And looking at your lineup, Banana, I have a feeling this won't be the last.
Oh God! Hey, want to have you on for another time after this?
We'll just have a Banana Chan section of my show.
This week we have Banana coming back on.